The evening air in New York City was crisp, filled with the familiar symphony of honking cars, vibrant billboards, and the swift movements of pedestrians bustling about. In a lavish penthouse with a stunning view of Central Park, James Crawford reclined in his leather armchair, savoring a glass of whiskey. He was a man who possessed it all: wealth, authority, and sway. His business empire, constructed through savvy real estate investments, positioned him among the wealthiest individuals in the city. Yet, in the midst of his triumphs, he was consumed by arrogance, and his thoughts were tainted by the conviction that love took a back seat to riches. Emily, his wife, lingered by the fireplace, her fingers anxiously twisting the hem of her dress. For days, she struggled to find the courage to share the news with him. Yet each time she met his cold, calculating gaze, doubt crept in. Tonight, however, she could no longer hold back. With a deep breath, she moved ahead. "James, I have something to share with you," she murmured gently. James hardly paid her any mind, his gaze fixated on the whiskey swirling in his glass. "Proceed," he remarked, his voice lacking any emotion. "I'm expecting," she murmured, her voice quivering. In that fleeting instant, silence enveloped the space. James set his glass down on the table and directed his gaze at her, his expression a mystery. Then, rather than joy or excitement, a sly grin crept onto his face. "Expecting?" he echoed with a hint of sarcasm. "So, you really think I'm going to accept that this child belongs to me?" Emily felt a heavy weight in her chest. "James, what are you trying to convey?" "Absolutely, it's yours. Our journey together has spanned 3 wonderful years of marriage. What reason would I have to be untruthful about this?" James rose suddenly, his imposing stature creating a shadow that loomed over her. "Stop pretending, Emily. From the very beginning, my mother cautioned me about you. She claimed you were only interested in my finances, and now your actions are confirming her suspicions." Emotion flooded Emily's eyes. "Your mother? James, your mother has always had a disfavor towards me. She always hoped you would choose a partner from your own social circle. Yet, my affection for you was rooted in your true self, not in your wealth." James emitted a sardonic chuckle. "Chuckle? Please spare me the humor. I perceive it clearly now. Do you really believe this child will guarantee your position in my life? So, you believe you have an everlasting right to my riches?" Emily couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Your money doesn't interest me, James. I simply wanted to convey this happiness to you. I believed you would feel joy." James leaned in, their faces just inches apart. "I have my doubts about you, Emily, and I refuse to be ensnared by the prospect of a child." Her hands moved to her stomach, a natural gesture of safeguarding the life blossoming within her. "James, I beg you, don't go through with this," she implored. "This is our little one." Yet James had resolved his thoughts. He delved into his pocket and retrieved a checkbook. "Here," he remarked, jotting down a figure. "Take this and go. Financial concerns will be a thing of the past." Emily gazed at the check in disbelief. "You think I can be bought?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Do you really believe I would exchange my child for something as trivial as a piece of paper?" James's expression became steely. "If you have no interest in the money, then depart with empty hands. However, you won't be remaining here. Gather your belongings and leave." The certainty in his voice sent a shiver through Emily. In that moment, she understood that the man she had once wed was a mere illusion, perhaps never truly present at all. Silently, she pivoted and made her way to the bedroom, tears cascading down her cheeks. With trembling hands, she packed a small bag. This was her sanctuary, the space where she had crafted aspirations alongside him. And now she found herself cast aside, as if she were an unfamiliar face. As she exited the room, James lingered by the door, arms folded across his chest. "Never return," he stated with a chilling detachment. Emily cast a final glance his way, yearning for the slightest hint of remorse to flicker in his gaze. Yet there was nothing. With a weighty heart, she pivoted and stepped out into the frigid night. She found herself without a destination. Her family was in Chicago, far away, and she found herself without any friends in the city. She meandered through the avenues of Manhattan, the vibrant neon lights and throngs of people starkly juxtaposed against the void she carried within. She held her stomach tightly, murmuring, "I'll take care of you, my little one. I will always ensure your well-being comes first." As the hours drifted by, the weight of her circumstances settled in. She found herself without a place to call home, devoid of funds, and utterly alone. Yet she possessed something far more precious, her unwavering resolve. She would not allow James's harshness to shatter her spirit. She would endure. She would nurture her child with affection, even if she had to embark on this journey solo. Unbeknownst to her, 2 decades later, destiny would reunite her with the man who had left her behind. Yet this time, the dynamics would shift. Before moving on to the next part, kindly subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Emily trembled as she strolled through the bustling streets of New York City, the sharp wind slicing through her light coat. The towering skyscrapers, once beacons of ambition and aspiration, now loomed heavy with a sense of confinement. In just a few hours, everything she had known had crumbled around her. The man she had cherished, the one she had entrusted with her deepest emotions, had cast her aside without a moment's pause. She encircled her arms around her abdomen with a sense of guardianship, sensing the gentle rise of her pregnancy. She found herself without a place to call home, devoid of funds and lacking any destination. The revelation was intense, yet she remained steadfast and composed. She needed to ponder. She needed to endure for the sake of her child. As the night grew darker, Emily wandered through the streets, searching for a spot to find solace. She meandered into Grand Central Terminal, discovering a bench tucked away in a more tranquil corner. She settled into her seat, weary, her muscles protesting from the long hours of trekking. Amidst the bustling crowd, passengers hurried to board their trains, their journeys progressing while hers had abruptly paused. She shut her eyes briefly, attempting to drown out the clamor, yet slumber eluded her. A relentless ache twisted in her belly, a stark reminder that she had not eaten since the morning. However, sustenance demanded funds, and she possessed none. By morning, she realized that remaining in New York was no longer an option. The city felt prohibitively costly, and each avenue echoed with memories of James. A new beginning was essential for her. Memories of her old college friend Rachel, who resided in Chicago, filled her mind. Though the years had created distance between them, Rachel's kindness remained a constant in her character. It was a gamble, yet Emily found herself with no alternatives. With a sense of trepidation, she navigated through the bustling Port Authority bus terminal, her hands quivering as she neared the ticket counter. The clerk hardly raised their gaze. Next, he summoned the board. "I need a bus ticket to Chicago," she said, her voice soft and hesitant. He inquired whether it was a one-way or round trip. Emily paused, uncertainty flickering in her mind. A round trip implies she had a destination to come back to. Yet, she found herself with nothing remaining in New York. "One direction," she whispered. "That'll be $120, the clerk remarked, his fingers dancing across the screen. Emily felt a sinking sensation in her stomach. She possessed nothing, completely devoid of any substance. She moved to the side, her thoughts swirling rapidly. She had never pleaded in her life, but what option remained for her? With a steadying breath, she moved toward a woman of middle age who exuded warmth and kindness. "Excuse me," she uttered with a hint of uncertainty. "I find myself in a rather dire predicament. I need to reach Chicago, but I'm short on funds for a bus ticket. If you have a moment to share something." The woman's gaze flickered elsewhere, revealing her discomfort. "I'm sorry, I can't help," she murmured, hurrying away. Emily took a deep breath and made another attempt. She approached an elderly gentleman, a businessman clad in a crisp suit, and a young couple entwined in each other's hands. The reactions were consistent: sympathy, evasion, dismissal. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Just as she was on the verge of surrender, a gentle tap on her shoulder interrupted her thoughts. She glanced over to find a slender man with gentle eyes. He appeared as though he had endured his fair share of struggles. "Chicago, huh?" he remarked. "I spent my formative years in that place. What amount do you require?" $120, she said, a hint of embarrassment in her voice. The man acknowledged with a nod and retrieved his wallet. He passed her the precise sum effortlessly. "I've experienced what you're going through," he stated plainly. "Just make sure to pass it on when the opportunity arises." Emily's eyes brimmed with tears. She vowed that she would. "Thanks a lot. This holds immense significance for me." An hour later, she found herself on the bus, observing the city fade away into the distance. As the distance unfolded before her, she pondered the journey that awaited. She was uncertain whether Rachel would welcome her. She was uncertain about her path to survival. For the first time since James had cast her aside, a flicker of hope began to emerge within her. As the bus rolled into Chicago the following morning, a surge of anxiety washed over Emily. She recalled Rachel's last known address from a dusty Christmas card, yet lacked a phone to make a call in advance. She disembarked from the bus, inhaling deeply. The atmosphere was invigorating, and the urban landscape thrummed with energy. Chicago had a distinct character compared to New York, lacking some of the sheen but exuding a certain warmth. With her remaining cash, she signaled for a cab and provided Rachel's address. As the vehicle navigated the bustling city streets, she made an effort to soothe her anxious thoughts. Upon arriving at a humble apartment building in Lincoln Park, Emily paused, uncertainty flickering in her mind. What would have happened if Rachel had relocated? What if she had forgotten her? Gathering her resolve, she rapped on the door. Moments stretched endlessly before it finally opened. Rachel stood there, her eyes growing wide with disbelief. "Emily," she exclaimed. Emotions cascaded down Emily's cheeks. She confessed that she was at a loss for where to turn next. Rachel glanced at her, noticing the frayed clothes, the exhaustion in her eyes, and the way she held her stomach. Without a moment's pause, she enveloped her in a warm embrace. "Step inside," she commanded with authority. As Emily entered, the cozy embrace of the apartment wrapped around her. It was a quaint little space, warm and inviting, adorned with shelves of books and cherished framed photographs. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee enveloped the surroundings. Rachel guided her to the couch and draped a blanket over her shoulders. "Tell me everything," she said, worry evident in her expression. Emily inhaled unsteadily and started to articulate her thoughts. She confided in Rachel about James, the pregnancy, and how he had cast her aside without a moment's hesitation. Rachel remained quiet, her gaze deepening with fury. "That scoundrel," she whispered as Emily concluded. "You are worthy of far greater things." Emily brushed away her tears. "I'm feeling lost, Rachel. I find myself without a job and without a place to call home. I can't bring this child up in such a harsh environment." Rachel grasped her hand. "You're not by yourself. Feel free to remain here for as long as you require. Together, we will navigate through this and find our way." After days of heaviness, Emily finally sensed a release from the burden on her chest. She had company. She possessed a companion. And perhaps, just perhaps, she had an opportunity to reconstruct her existence. Before moving on to the next part, kindly subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. As the days stretched into weeks, Emily gradually found herself adapting to her new life in Chicago. Rachel's cozy apartment transformed into her sanctuary, a space where she could exhale freely, unburdened by the threat of eviction. Each morning, she awoke to the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee, the distant hum of city traffic seeping through the windows, and the warm presence of Rachel, who had transformed from an old friend into a cherished member of her family. Yet, in spite of the warmth and kindness Rachel extended, Emily understood that she couldn't depend on her indefinitely. She needed to be self-reliant, discover a means to sustain herself, and above all, get ready for the impending arrival of her baby. Her initial hurdle was securing employment. Without any savings and lacking a college degree, her choices were quite restricted. She wandered the bustling streets of downtown Chicago, diligently submitting applications at cafes, diners, and retail shops. Rejections arrived quickly, some courteous, others quite brusque. "We're seeking an individual with experience. Otherwise, they might say we're not currently hiring." Though it was disheartening, she remained resolute in her determination to persevere. After a long afternoon spent searching for job opportunities, she decided to take a break at a quaint diner in River North. The air was filled with the enticing aroma of sizzling burgers and warm, freshly baked pies. A notice on the window stated that assistance was needed. With a sense of urgency, she entered and made her way to the counter. A woman in her middle years, with keen eyes and a weary demeanor, glanced up from the task of cleaning a coffee mug. "What would you like?" she inquired. "I noticed the sign outside," Emily said, her voice trembling slightly. "Is there still an opportunity for employment?" The woman observed her intently for a moment. "Have you ever had experience working in a restaurant?" Emily gave a slight shake of her head. "However, I pick things up quickly. This job is incredibly important to me." The woman let out a soft sigh as she placed the mug on the table. "The task at hand is quite challenging. The compensation leaves much to be desired, and the clientele can sometimes be quite unpleasant. Do you believe you can manage that?" Emily nodded with enthusiasm. "I will go to any lengths necessary." The woman, who identified herself as Margaret, the proprietor, cast a doubtful glance at Emily before passing her an apron. "All right, your journey begins tomorrow. Early hours of the day. Please ensure you arrive on time." Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her, almost bringing her to tears. Though it was modest, it marked the beginning. That evening, she confided in Rachel, who embraced her warmly. "Do you see? You're already moving forward," she remarked with a grin. The following morning, Emily showed up bright and early, resolute in her quest to demonstrate her capabilities. The diner was an unassuming spot, a regular haunt for truck drivers, office workers, and locals who had been visiting for years. The tasks were draining: taking orders, refilling coffee cups, clearing tables. But for the first time in weeks, Emily experienced a newfound sense of purpose. She was not merely existing. She was battling for a brighter tomorrow. With each passing day, she began to tuck away every dollar she could find. She reduced her spending by dining solely on Rachel's home-cooked meals and opting to walk rather than take the bus. Yet, despite having the job, she felt an undeniable longing for something greater. The journey of pregnancy brought along a wave of medical expenses, and soon the reality of diapers, clothing, and the myriad costs of nurturing a little one would set in. After a long shift one evening, she found herself seated across from Rachel at their modest kitchen table. She acknowledged that there was more to be done. "This position falls short." Rachel, immersed in the task of grading papers for her teaching job, paused to reflect. "Have you considered enrolling in evening courses? Perhaps something that might assist you in securing a more desirable position." Emily let out a weary breath. "I lack the resources and time for that." Rachel drummed her pen rhythmically on the table. "What are your thoughts on community programs? In the city, there are groups dedicated to supporting single mothers. Certain programs provide scholarships and job training, opportunities that could benefit you in the future." A glimmer of hope ignited within Emily. The following day, she made her way to the Chicago Women's Resource Center, where she encountered a counselor named Linda. She shared her circumstances, and Linda attentively absorbed the details before presenting her with a list of available programs. She assured Emily that she was not alone in this. Some individuals are eager to lend a hand. Emily was drawn to one of the programs, a training course for medical office assistants. It was brief, cost-effective, and guaranteed consistent employment prospects. Without hesitation, she enrolled, resolute in her quest to create a secure future for her child. With each passing week, her belly expanded, mirroring the strength of her resolve. She juggled work, classes, and doctor's appointments, persevering through fatigue because she understood that every ounce of effort was for her child. Margaret at the diner recognized her commitment and started to show her greater respect, sometimes discreetly offering her extra food to take home. Rachel stood steadfast, offering encouragement through the most challenging times. One evening, while Rachel sat in her room meticulously folding baby clothes she had purchased from a second-hand store, a sudden flutter in her stomach caught her off guard. She paused, her hand resting gently on the small bump, and then she felt it once more, a tiny, unmistakable kick. Tears welled in her eyes as she softly murmured, "You're truly in there, aren't you?" In that instant, she experienced a profound bond with her baby, a love so overwhelming that it eclipsed all the hurt James had inflicted. Meanwhile, on the other side of the nation, James Crawford reveled in his opulent lifestyle in New York, blissfully ignorant of the woman he had cast aside. His business empire continued to expand, with his name featured in Forbes articles and finance publications. Women drifted in and out, each fleeting presence barely leaving a mark. He had persuaded himself that his actions were justified, that Emily was merely a misstep in his life. He never paused to reflect on the child he had left behind. Yet destiny had its own plans for reunion, and James remained unaware that 2 decades later, Emily would re-enter his life, transformed from the fragile woman he once knew into a figure of remarkable strength beyond his wildest expectations. Yet for her son Daniel, from the moment he entered the world at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, she realized her calling transcended any suffering James had caused her. Cradling him for the first time, his delicate fingers entwined with hers, she vowed silently to ensure he would never experience the sense of abandonment that had once haunted her. The initial years posed the greatest challenges. She put in long hours, often taking on double shifts at the diner, all while finishing her training as a medical office assistant. Rachel stayed close, providing support for Daniel as Emily's commitments grew too demanding. Some nights, Emily would return home drained, her body weary, but the instant she caught sight of her baby's drowsy grin, all the fatigue faded away. When Daniel turned 5, Emily had landed a full-time position at a pediatric clinic in Lincoln Park, putting her diner days behind her at last. It was a modest triumph, yet one of great importance. The reliable income allowed her to secure a more desirable living situation, a small yet inviting 2-bedroom apartment nestled in a secure area. Life remained challenging, yet it had found a sense of stability. She ensured Daniel was well-equipped with books, cozy clothing, and occasional little treats. Emily seldom pondered over James. In the beginning, she experienced flashes of anger, moments when she questioned whether he ever felt remorse for his actions. Yet, as time went by, she came to understand that fixating on him was an unproductive use of her energy. He decided to wipe them from his existence, while she opted to create a fresh start. Daniel blossomed into a thoughtful and kind-hearted young man. He possessed Emily's dark hair and resolute spirit, yet his piercing blue eyes were undeniably his father's. Emily always laid the truth bare before him. She informed him that his father had departed prior to his birth, that he was a formidable businessman in New York, yet her words carried no trace of resentment. Some individuals make decisions that cannot be reversed, she would assert, yet that does not determine your identity. Daniel rarely inquired about James. To him, his mother encompassed everything he held dear. He was captivated by her strength, her unwavering spirit, and the way she effortlessly wore a smile, regardless of her exhaustion. By the time Daniel reached 18, he had transformed into everything Emily had envisioned. A driven, responsible young man with a keen intellect and a heart brimming with compassion. His acceptance into Columbia University brought a surge of pride and a twinge of fear to Emily. Releasing him was the most challenging decision she had ever faced, yet she understood he was worthy of the finest chances. As she bid him farewell in New York City, she embraced him fiercely, murmuring, "Go leave your imprint on the world, my dear." He vowed to reach out daily, and as she observed him blend into the throng of students, she sensed the burden of her sacrifices alongside the elegance of their shared creation. In the meantime, James Crawford's journey had taken an unexpected turn. His achievements in real estate soared to unprecedented levels, establishing him as one of the richest individuals in New York. Yet, achievement had been attained with a price to pay. Throughout the years, he had entered into matrimony on 2 occasions, each culminating in acrimonious separations. He had offspring from both unions, yet their communication with him was minimal. His empire bestowed upon him riches that knew no bounds, yet true happiness eluded him. He had consistently brushed aside the past, entombing memories of Emily deep within, convinced that his actions had been essential. He convinced himself he had moved on, that she was merely a distant memory. Yet destiny had its own designs. One evening, as Daniel strolled through Manhattan, filled with anticipation for his new life, he came upon a towering skyscraper adorned with the name Crawford Enterprises in striking bold letters. The name was familiar to him. It was something his mother had brought up during his childhood. A deep sense of curiosity ignited within him, and for the first time in his life, he experienced an intense desire to uncover the truth about the man who had left them behind. With a pounding heart, he retrieved his phone and started to look for information. Piece after piece depicted a merciless entrepreneur, a figure revered for his riches yet condemned for his absence of compassion. As Daniel perused the images of James Crawford, a disquieting blend of feelings washed over him. This was the individual who had opted for authority instead of kinship, a person who had turned away without a glance in the rearview mirror. On that evening, Daniel reached out to Emily. "Mom," he said thoughtfully, "do you ever think he feels remorse about it?" The line was eerily quiet. Emily was fully aware of whom he referred to. She inhaled deeply before responding. "Perhaps," she murmured gently. "Yet I ceased my pondering quite some time back." Daniel took his time before replying. His mother had moved on, yet a part of him yearned for resolution. He was uncertain about what he sought, whether it was a clash, an expression of regret, or merely a recognition of his presence. In the coming weeks, he delved into every detail he could find about James Crawford. As he delved deeper into his studies, a growing sense of conflict began to stir within him. His father had constructed a realm, but at what price? Narratives of broken unions, distant offspring, and cutthroat corporate maneuvers crafted a portrait of a man who possessed everything yet appeared to lack the most essential of all. One afternoon, as he strolled along Wall Street, Daniel resolved to take a daring step. He stepped into the imposing Crawford Enterprises building, his heart racing. The receptionist, elegantly attired and in her 40s, glanced up. "Do you have an appointment?" she inquired. "No," Daniel confessed. "However, I must speak with Mr. Crawford. It holds significant value." The woman arched an eyebrow. "And who might you be?" Daniel paused for just a moment before finally voicing the thoughts that had lingered in his mind for years. "I am his son." The receptionist at Crawford Enterprises fixed her gaze on Daniel for an extended moment, her composed facade wavering just a touch. Her eyes held a hint of skepticism, yet beneath it lay a spark of curiosity. She scrutinized him, weighing the possibility that this young man before her might actually be sincere. Daniel experienced an unusual blend of feelings. He entered the building on a whim, lacking a plan or any notion of what might unfold. And now, as he stood here, asserting his identity, it suddenly felt tangible in a way it never had before. He was the offspring of James Crawford, the individual who had forsaken his mother, the individual who had wiped them from his existence, was seated somewhere within this colossal glass structure, entirely oblivious to the fact that the past was poised to confront him. The receptionist finally mustered the courage to clear her throat. "Do you have any identification?" she inquired, her tone polished yet tinged with doubt. Daniel paused for a moment before retrieving his driver's license. She cast a fleeting look at the name, yet it revealed nothing to her. Naturally, he carried his mother's surname. "Stay put," she instructed, rising to her feet. She glided through a polished glass door, leaving Daniel solitary in the expansive lobby, enveloped by the quiet resonance of achievement. He surveyed the lofty ceilings, the grand artwork, and the meticulously arranged sophistication of the entire space. This was the realm his father had crafted, the realm he had selected over kinship. Time dragged on, each minute feeling like an eternity. Daniel shifted on his feet, his heart racing with every fleeting moment. Just as he was on the verge of rethinking his choice, the glass door swung open once more. A figure in a dark suit stepped forward, a security officer with a tall and broad-shouldered presence. His expression was a mystery as he drew closer to Daniel. "Mr. Crawford is ready to see you," he stated, his tone steady yet impartial. "Come along with me." Daniel took a deep breath and gave a slight nod. He trailed the man through a labyrinth of glass-walled offices and marble corridors, his palms clammy despite the chill in the air. At last, they came to a halt before an imposing wooden door. The security officer swung the door wide, unveiling an expansive office adorned with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of Manhattan. Seated at a polished black desk was a man Daniel had only encountered in news articles and interviews. James Crawford, his dad. James lifted his gaze from the screen, his striking blue eyes, those same eyes Daniel recognized in his own reflection, narrowing just a bit. He appeared more seasoned than the images implied, with strands of gray woven through his hair and creases on his face that spoke of countless years of strain. Yet, he maintained the same commanding presence and authority that had established him as a figure of legend in the corporate realm. For a moment, he observed Daniel intently, his face a mask of inscrutability. Then, in a tone that was both incisive and aloof, he asked, "Who are you?" Daniel sensed a knot forming in his stomach, yet he maintained his gaze. "I'm Daniel," he stated calmly. "Daniel Carter." He allowed the words to linger in the atmosphere for a brief moment before continuing, "Your son." James paused before responding. His fingers, previously relaxed on the laptop keyboard, curled ever so slightly. His jaw tightened, yet his face stayed meticulously neutral. "I don't have a son," he stated with a calm demeanor. Daniel emitted a faint, sardonic chuckle. "Indeed, he mentioned that. I anticipated you would respond that way." He moved in closer, determined not to let James brush him off so readily. "You abandoned my mother during her pregnancy. You cast her out of your home as if she were insignificant. She brought me up by herself, toiling tirelessly so that I could have a better future. All this time, you've remained in your realm, acting as if we are mere shadows, unnoticed and unacknowledged." James breathed out gently, as though he were attempting to collect his scattered thoughts. He rose from his chair, gliding around the desk with deliberate strides. Up close, Daniel noticed the subtle hesitation in his eyes, a fleeting glimpse of something he couldn't fully articulate. "Emily Carter," James whispered softly, as if the name held a secret all its own. That was the name she carried. He glanced at Daniel once more, and this time, his gaze held a depth beyond mere cold detachment. There was acknowledgement. He remarked that she never made an effort to reach out to him. Daniel tightened his grip, his fists balling up in a surge of emotion. "Why would she?" he retorted. "It was evident that she had no place in your world. You cast her aside with nothing to her name. She didn't return in desperation because she possessed self-respect. And she was perfectly fine without you." James exhaled deeply, his hand gliding over his face. For the first time, he appeared weary. Not the weariness of a businessman, but something more profound. A weightier matter. "You really shouldn't be here," he said at last. Daniel's heart raced with fury. "Is it really just about your convenience? Because it disrupts the ideal existence you've crafted for yourself?" He shook his head, his voice tinged with exasperation. "I didn't arrive with the intention of seeking financial gain. I have no expectations from you. I simply wish to meet you in person, to grasp how a man could turn his back on his own child and never glance back." James remained quiet for an extended period. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft and subdued. "Do you really believe it was simple?" He averted his gaze, striding toward the window. "Do you really believe I haven't considered it?" Daniel gazed at him, utterly astonished. "If you considered it, you certainly didn't take any action." James emitted a sardonic laugh. "What would you have preferred I do? I was youthful and full of ambition. I found myself unprepared for the role of a father." He pivoted to confront Daniel, his gaze steely. "What if I had made the effort to connect? What if I had made an effort to be included in your world? Would Emily have allowed me?" Daniel paused, uncertainty flickering in his mind. He was aware that his mother had never expressed a desire to have James re-enter their lives. However, that did not justify James's actions. "You didn't even make an effort," Daniel said softly. "That is the distinction." James observed him closely, and for the first time, a flicker of what could be interpreted as regret crossed his features. "He conceded that you were correct." "I did not." Daniel inhaled deeply. He had arrived seeking answers, and perhaps he had found them, though not in the form he had hoped for. His father was not a villain. He was merely a man, a deeply imperfect individual who, after making a choice long ago, chose to never reconsider it. Perhaps that was even more troubling. "I can't say I had any clear expectations," Daniel remarked, shaking his head. "I suppose I simply had to witness it firsthand." He pivoted toward the door, poised to depart. Just as he was about to leave, James called out once more. "Daniel." Daniel hesitated, his fingers resting on the doorknob. He remained facing away. James paused briefly before asking, "What does your mother think about you being here?" Daniel's fingers curled firmly around the doorknob. He tilted his head just enough to catch James's eye. He confessed that she is unaware. "However, I believe she ceased to consider you quite some time back." With that, he exited the office, leaving James Crawford solitary in his domain, gazing at the son he had never known. Before we proceed, kindly subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Daniel emerged from the imposing Crawford Enterprises building, stepping into the crisp autumn air of Manhattan, his thoughts swirling with a tempest of feelings. The dialogue with James had rendered him hollow, as if he had been on a quest for something that was never truly there. He had envisioned this moment for years, dreamed of facing the man who had left him and his mother. Yet the truth was far less theatrical. His father was neither a cold-hearted antagonist nor a regretful soul in search of forgiveness. He was merely an entrepreneur who had made a choice and accepted the consequences. There are no regrets, no justifications offered, merely a stark recognition of what has transpired. It felt nearly more painful than a direct rejection, as at least rejection carried a certain intensity. This, however, was apathy, and it pierced Daniel in a manner he hadn't anticipated. He meandered through the bustling streets, the cacophony of honking taxis and the murmur of pedestrians merging into a background hum around him. His phone vibrated in his pocket, yet he chose to disregard it. He sensed it was his mother, likely pondering why he hadn't returned her call. Unbeknownst to her, he stood nearby, grappling with the challenge of revealing his presence. Could she possibly be upset, feeling let down? Or would she merely shake her head and declare, "I told you so"? Daniel found himself unprepared for any of those responses. He required some time to reflect on everything initially. In due course, he found his way to Central Park, settling onto a bench that offered a view of the tranquil lake. The cool breeze wafted the aroma of autumn leaves as joggers glided past, absorbed in their personal journeys. He reflected on his mother, considering the sacrifices she had endured to provide him with a good life. She juggled 2 jobs, frequently returning home late and weary, but she always ensured he never sensed any lack in his life. Throughout every birthday, every school event, and every scraped knee, she had always been present. And the man who had bestowed upon him existence? He had not ventured to any place at all. Daniel finally pulled out his phone and checked his messages. As anticipated, there were numerous missed calls from his mother, accompanied by a handful of texts. One in particular piqued his interest. "Reach out to me. It holds significant value." His stomach knotted with uncertainty as he paused briefly before pressing her number. She answered on the first ring. "Daniel," she exhaled, her voice tinged with relief. "Where have you been hiding? I've been attempting to get in touch with you throughout the day." "Apologies, Mom," he murmured, massaging his forehead. "I simply required a moment to reflect." A silence lingered on the other end. "Where might you be?" she inquired with caution. "In the urban landscape," he confessed. He found himself caught in a delicate balance, reluctant to deceive her while grappling with the uncertainty of how much truth to share at that moment. His mother paused, her silence stretching out before she finally spoke. "You went to see him, didn't you?" Daniel let out a slow breath. Indeed, prolonged hush ensued. When she finally spoke again, her voice carried a softness, tinged with a sense of resignation. I had a feeling you would, in time. He scowled. You're not angry. She emitted a soft chuckle, though it was devoid of genuine mirth. Is that you, Matt? Absolutely not, Daniel. I had a feeling this day would arrive. I simply wish. I'm uncertain. Perhaps I wished you wouldn't need to seek out answers that might leave you unfulfilled. Daniel leaned in, resting his elbows on his knees. I'm not sure what I was anticipating, but he showed no concern, Mom. He didn't even attempt to feign any sense of remorse. He simply accepted it, as if abandoning us was merely a matter of strategy. She let out a weary breath. That's exactly who he is, darling. That was his true essence. Have you ever attempted to contact him? Daniel inquired with a hint of uncertainty. After a prolonged silence, she finally responded. She conceded with a simple no. I was youthful, shattered, and too dignified to plead for someone to cherish their own offspring. To be honest, I didn't see the point in having him around if he wasn't genuinely interested in being part of your life. You are worthy of so much more. Daniel experienced a tightness in his throat. He remarked that you never shared much about him. Just that he departed. I never wanted you to carry hate in your heart as you grew, she said plainly. He chose his path and I chose mine. I chose to ensure you always felt valued. Daniel took a deep breath. You did, Mom. You were sufficient. Silence enveloped the line, and when she finally spoke again, her voice trembled with deep emotion. That's precisely what I've longed to hear. At last, Daniel experienced a moment of clarity that day. Perhaps he could have found closure without ever meeting James. Perhaps the solutions had resided within him all this time, embodied in the woman who had offered him everything, even when she possessed nothing. He rose to his feet, surveying the park one final time before declaring, I'm coming home. His mother let out a sigh of relief. I will remain present. After ending the call, Daniel inhaled deeply one final time before making his way to the subway. For years, he had been on a quest for something elusive. Justice, recognition, perhaps even retribution, yet ultimately, none of it held significance. His mother was indeed correct. He had no use for James Crawford. He never did. At last, he could begin to embrace the life he had always envisioned. Before moving on to the next part, kindly subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Daniel lingered in the stillness of his modest Brooklyn apartment, gazing at the soft shimmer of the city lights beyond his window. The encounter with James Crawford had created an unsettling emptiness within him, a gap he found difficult to understand and even harder to bridge. He had devoted years to envisioning the scenario, maybe an intense clash where his father ultimately acknowledged his errors, or a poignant reunion where James conveyed remorse and sought absolution. Yet the truth had been harsh, unfeeling, without anger or guilt, simply a dispassionate recognition of what has transpired. It felt as though Daniel's presence had been reduced to a mere afterthought in the man's narrative. The revelation was sharp, yet strangely, it brought a sense of freedom. Throughout his childhood, he found himself consumed by thoughts of what could have driven his father away, questioning the imperfections within himself that rendered him unworthy of affection. But now he recognized the reality. James's absence was unrelated to him. It had always revolved around his father's inherent selfishness. Realizing that allowed Daniel to finally release the burden of self-blame. He reached for his phone, gliding through his contacts until he found his mother's number. He had already conversed with her after the meeting, yet an urge within him compelled him to listen to her voice once more. After a brief pause, he made the call, and she picked up right away. Daniel, she said with a gentle warmth, the soothing familiarity of her voice enveloping him. Hey Mom, he murmured, his tone gentler than he had meant it to be. I simply wanted to reach out and see how things are going. She let out a soft, amused laugh. Darling, there's no need for you to worry about me. Don't forget, I'm the mother. I reach out to see how you're doing. A faint smile played at the corners of his mouth. Indeed, I simply longed to listen to your voice. She hesitated, as though she could feel the gravity of his words. "How are you doing?" Daniel reclined on the couch, his fingers combing through his hair. "I'm uncertain. I had hoped that encountering him would provide a sense of resolution, yet it only leaves me feeling hollow." She let out a weary breath. "Closure is not something that can be found in others, Daniel. It originates from the depths of one's being. James was not about to offer you anything you didn't already possess." Daniel shut his eyes, allowing her words to permeate his thoughts. "You were correct regarding him, concerning all matters." A pause lingered on the line before she finally spoke. "I never wished to be right about this, darling. I would have sacrificed everything for him to be the father you truly deserved." His chest constricted. "You were sufficient, Mom. You have always been that way." A gentle sniffle echoed through the line, revealing her struggle to contain her tears. "Thank you, darling. That signifies more than you realize." They continued their conversation, sharing fond memories and chuckling over tales from his youth. As the call ended, Daniel experienced a sense of relief, as though a burden had been removed from his shoulders. Perhaps he hadn't discovered the resolution he sought, yet he had unearthed something far more precious. The understanding that he had always been accompanied, even in solitude. As the days went by, he immersed himself in his work, dedicating all his energy to his projects. He worked as a financial analyst at a modest firm, distant from the riches and influence his father possessed. Yet he took pride in the life he had created. He had toiled diligently for all he possessed, never relying on shortcuts or favors, and that was a truth that James Crawford could never diminish. One afternoon, while picking up coffee at a cafe close to Wall Street, he unexpectedly encountered an old college friend, Michael. Years had passed without a word between them, but during a coffee catch-up, Michael brought up a business opportunity, an investment startup seeking sharp minds like Daniel's. Initially, Daniel wavered. He possessed a reliable position with a consistent income. Yet, there was an exhilarating allure in the notion of creating something from scratch, of demonstrating to himself that he could achieve success on his own terms. Following several restless nights of contemplating his choices, he resolved to make the jump. He left his job and became part of Michael's startup, immersing himself in long hours and countless meetings. The task was draining yet rewarding. He was creating something genuine, something that stood apart from his history or his father's legacy. As the months rolled by, a year had passed, and Daniel discovered he was flourishing. The startup soared, attracting investment and growing at an impressive pace. He had established his own identity in the industry, not merely as James Crawford's son, but as Daniel, a self-made individual who achieved his success through relentless determination. One evening, while he was getting ready for a significant investors' meeting, an unexpected email landed in his inbox. A journalist was gathering insights for a feature on successful entrepreneurs who come from distinctive backgrounds. The email referenced James Crawford, suggesting that the journalist was aware of Daniel's link to him. His stomach churned at the idea of his history being thrust into the limelight. He gazed at the screen for what felt like an eternity, weighing the decision of whether to reply. At last, he inhaled deeply and crafted a response. He was direct and straightforward. "I have no ties to James Crawford. My narrative is uniquely mine." For the very first time in his existence, he genuinely embraced the truth of it. Before we proceed, kindly subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Daniel had always thought that achieving success would grant him tranquility, that once he had established a life free from his father's influence, he would finally feel complete. Yet, despite the success of his startup and the growing recognition of his name within New York's financial circles, a subtle unease persisted within him. Regardless of his achievements, a fragment of him remained burdened by the scars of his history. The reality was that no level of achievement could erase the years of neglect, the countless nights his mother had suffered through, or the lingering doubts that had plagued him for years. He had struggled fiercely to separate himself from James Crawford, yet the man's presence still clung to him in ways he couldn't overlook. After a lengthy meeting one evening, Daniel meandered through Central Park, lost in thought. The city lights danced among the branches, while the cool autumn breeze whispered memories of days gone by. He took out his phone, weighing the decision of whether to reach out to his mother. Days had slipped by without a word from him to her, and while he understood she didn't anticipate frequent check-ins, a nagging sense of guilt lingered whenever their exchanges grew sparse. As he paused, his phone buzzed with a call from an unfamiliar number. Typically, he would disregard such calls. Yet an inexplicable force urged him to pick up the phone. "Hello," he spoke with a hint of hesitation. A moment of silence was broken by a resonant voice. "Is that you, Daniel?" His breath hitched in his throat. That voice was familiar to him. More aged, coarser than he recalled, yet undeniably familiar. James Crawford. Daniel's fingers clenched the phone with intensity. "Where did you find my number?" James let out a heavy breath. "I have my methods. I thought it was the right moment for us to have a conversation." A harsh chuckle slipped from Daniel's lips. "Did you come to that conclusion? After 2 decades, you've chosen this moment as the perfect opportunity?" "I realize I'm not worthy of a warm welcome," James confessed, his voice notably quiet. "I came across the article regarding your company. You've achieved quite a lot." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I accomplished it on my own. I understand." Another moment of silence lingered. "I understand if you don't feel concerned, but I must admit I'm not doing so well lately. In terms of health." A torrent of mixed feelings washed over Daniel. A part of him felt the urge to convey to James that he was indifferent, that whatever transpired in his life was solely his own concern. Yet, a different aspect of him, the one that continued to search for clarity, couldn't overlook the weight in his father's tone. "What is it that you desire?" he inquired, his voice remaining icy. "To see you," James remarked. "One conversation, that's all I request." Daniel paused, uncertainty flickering in his mind. Every instinct urged him to turn back, to allow the past to remain undisturbed. Yet, there was an unsettling quality to James's voice, as if this moment held the key to the closure he had pursued throughout his entire existence. "All right," Daniel replied. "A single dialogue. However, I select the location." James nodded in agreement, and they set a plan to gather the following evening at a serene eatery in Manhattan. Daniel lay awake through the night, restless and plagued by doubts about his choices. As dawn broke, he realized he could no longer avoid the inevitable. The restaurant was almost deserted when he walked in, his anxiety palpable as he surveyed the space. Then he spotted him, James Crawford, nestled in a corner booth. The man appeared altered since the last time Daniel had encountered him. His once formidable physique had diminished, his visage etched with the passage of time and an undercurrent of something more profound, perhaps remorse. Daniel positioned himself opposite, maintaining an expression that revealed nothing. "Go ahead and speak." James inhaled deeply. "I have committed numerous errors. I refuse to justify their actions. Yet parting from you and your mother, that was the most painful of all." Daniel let out a derisive laugh. "That's not something you can claim at this moment. 2 decades were at your disposal to make it right." James gave a slight nod. "Indeed, you are correct. I do not anticipate absolution. However, I feel compelled to clarify." He gazed at his hands, as though collecting his reflections. "When your mother became pregnant, I felt a wave of fear wash over me. Not about fatherhood, but about the loss of the life I had created. My journey, my standing. I acted with self-interest. I believed I could wipe away my errors by fleeing from them." Daniel felt a constriction in his chest. "You didn't merely run. You shattered us. My mother endured hardships for years while you enjoyed a life of comfort." James acknowledged softly. "Every single day since, I felt that regret." He let out a slow breath. "I attempted to persuade myself that my absence was a kindness to you. You would thrive more in my absence. Yet, the reality is that I was lacking in courage." Daniel gazed intently, seeking the truth hidden within his father's gaze. He had envisioned this dialogue numerous times, yet none of his envisioned scenarios had equipped him for this moment. A man laid bare, acknowledging his shortcomings with sincerity and without facade. "What's the reason for this timing?" At long last, Daniel posed the question. What prompts a connection after such a long period? James paused, uncertainty flickering in his mind. Due to the limited time I have remaining. He gently tugged at his sleeve, exposing the hospital bracelet hidden beneath. Advanced cancer. Medical professionals indicate that I have a limited time, possibly just a few months. Daniel felt his heart racing. He had devoted his entire existence to loathing this man, harboring deep resentment for the suffering he had inflicted. Now he was receiving the news that James Crawford, the father he had never truly known, was on the brink of death. He remained silent for an extended period. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he inquired, "What do you seek from me?" James locked eyes with him. Not currency, no sympathy, merely an opportunity to connect with my son before time slips away. Daniel sensed a fracture within, the defenses he had meticulously constructed over the years starting to tremble. He was uncertain if forgiveness for James would ever be within his reach. He was uncertain if he truly desired to. Yet, a deep intuition whispered to him that turning his back at this moment wouldn't erase the hurt he felt. Before moving on to the next part, kindly subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Daniel lingered in the stillness of his New York apartment, gazing at the city skyline framed by the expansive glass windows. The encounter with his father had plunged him into a whirlwind of emotions, a blend of frustration, uncertainty, and an unnamed feeling that he wasn't prepared to confront just yet. He had always thought that if he ever encountered James Crawford again, he would be consumed by nothing but animosity. He had envisioned the clash countless times. He stood tall, a figure of success, flaunting his achievements, forcing his father to confront the regret of every moment spent in abandonment. Yet the truth had proven to be much more intricate. His father was a man nearing the end, devoid of his former pride, confronting the twilight of his existence burdened by the heavy toll of his regrets. And that transformed everything. The following days unfolded with a sense of unease. Daniel immersed himself in his tasks, participating in meetings, managing investments, doing anything to prevent his thoughts from drifting back to James. Yet, despite his efforts to cast it aside, the thought lingered on. His father was nearing the end, and he faced a fleeting moment to choose between letting him depart with lingering uncertainties or embracing the opportunity to understand the man whose absence had profoundly influenced his existence. Olivia, his mother, had reached out, her intuition telling her that something was amiss. She remained unaware of the meeting, and Daniel found himself uncertain about how to broach the subject. She had endured more than her fair share, yet a part of him longed to hear her voice, to be reminded of the woman who had nurtured him without a second thought. On the third night after meeting James, Daniel found himself navigating the streets of Manhattan, his mind drawn to the hospital where James was undergoing treatment. He was uncertain of his purpose or destination, yet an undeniable force within him held firm, refusing to release its grip. Upon his arrival, he discovered James in a modest hospital room, propped up in bed, his formerly robust physique now delicate. The elderly gentleman appeared truly taken aback upon his arrival, his tired gaze brightening for a fleeting instant. "I didn't think you'd come back," James admitted, his voice rougher than it had been before. Daniel paused, uncertainty lingering as he approached the entrance. He confessed honestly, "I can't explain why I did it." James gestured toward the chair next to his bed, and after a moment of hesitation, Daniel took a seat. A profound silence enveloped them, laden with a history of unasked questions. At last, Daniel found his voice. "Reveal the reality to me, concerning all matters." And for the very first time in his existence, James Crawford did. He reminisced about his formative years, reflecting on a reality where affluence equated to influence and vulnerability was seen as a flaw. He recounted the moment he met Olivia, expressing how he had loved her in his own self-centered manner, yet was paralyzed by the fear of losing grip on the meticulously crafted life he had built. He confessed that upon hearing her news of the pregnancy, a wave of panic had washed over him. He convinced himself that departure was the sole path, that embracing fatherhood would dismantle the empire he had painstakingly constructed. He had persuaded himself it was the right course of action. Yet, beneath the surface, he had always been aware of the reality. He had left them not because he had to, but because he was afraid. Daniel absorbed the words, a tempest of feelings swirling within him. He had lived his life under the impression that his father had never cared. Yet now he perceived a different truth. A man who had been shattered long before his own existence began. Despite his desire to cling to his anger, he found it impossible to overlook the pain in James's voice, the regret woven into each word. "I don't expect you to forgive me," James said finally, his voice quivering with emotion. "I simply couldn't depart from this life without expressing how deeply remorseful I feel." Daniel forced down the knot that had formed in his throat. After years of anticipation for this apology, he came to understand that its arrival did not undo the past. It did not alter the pain his mother had experienced, nor the struggles he faced growing up without a father. Yet perhaps it might alter something entirely different. Perhaps it would enable him to progress unburdened by the heaviness of bitterness dragging him back. The subsequent weeks flew by in a haze. Daniel began to frequent James's company, their dialogues evolving into something more profound. They conversed about commerce, about existence, about the time that had slipped away from them. It was challenging and far from flawless, yet it held value. Olivia felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her when Daniel finally spoke, yet she remained silent, allowing him to continue. She had come to terms with her history, and she believed in Daniel's ability to choose for himself. One evening, as Daniel lingered by James's hospital bed, the older man gazed at him with weary yet serene eyes. "I never had the chance to be your father," he said. "In these recent weeks, you have allowed me the opportunity to become something nearly significant." Daniel experienced a constriction in his chest. He had never referred to James as Dad, and it seemed unlikely that he ever would. In that instant, he extended his hand and grasped his father's firmly. It was the nearest semblance of absolution he could extend. James Crawford departed this world 2 days later. Everything was bequeathed to Daniel in his will. Not only his riches but also his private journals, unsent letters he had penned, fragments of a man he had never fully understood. Initially, Daniel found himself at a loss regarding how to handle everything. As time went on, he discovered himself immersed in the pages, grasping his father's essence in ways he had never experienced before. Months later, as he stood in his office gazing out at the city that had become the backdrop of his life, a realization dawned upon him. He had dedicated years to pursuing achievement, striving to demonstrate that he was independent of his father's influence. Yet at this moment he found himself standing still for the first time. He was progressing, not in rebellion against his history but in acknowledgement of it.